that's fine. Okay. That's what long? Yeah. Cool. Okay. Yeah, I'll be good. Yeah. If you've got stuff to do, then yeah, go ahead. I'll be good here and we'll just go for a while. Mm-hmm. Yeah, easy peasy. Okay. Yay. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Tonight, sure. Yeah, I'm in town, so yeah, just let me know when and where, and I'll be glad to do it. So. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah. Okay. All right, sounds good. Thank you. All right, thanks. All right. Close those doors real quick, so it's not quite so chattery, and then we'll get started. Good shape here. How many of us are there here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. Perfect timing. That was good. All right. Okay. So whenever these like question and answer, a discussion, a conversation sessions happen, it's like you never know exactly what's gonna go on here. So I prepared a couple of different things for us to do. I actually had this set up to run on Slido. Are any of you familiar with Slido? Okay, Slido is, you know what, I'll show you what it looks like in case it's something that you want to try. It's kind of like Pear Deck and Nearpod a little bit, if you're familiar with that. It's like an enhanced question and answer tool. I really like it, especially for professional development. And so, you know, I can just present my slides with Slido, and you can go to slido.com and punch in the little code, and then that way you're able to answer, you like punch in your responses and stuff, which we can totally do. But again, with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 people, we may not need to do that. We could probably, like, I don't know, talk to each other. Crazy idea, right? So I'll probably not run the Slido part of it, but I wanted to show that to you real quick. Because I know sometimes that's the fun part, is like learning about the nerdy digital tools that other people use that we don't use, you know? So that's what Slido looks like. Yeah, it runs as an add-on in Google Slides. But you can actually run it straight from the website. So if you go to slido.com or sly.do and make an account, it's like a lot of those other tools. It's got a free plan and it's got a premium plan, and the free plan lets you do a lot. So I think of this as if I was going to use like the Q&A in Google Slides, but I want to do a little bit more, this is going to let you do a little bit more even with the free plan. So anyway, that's so I had that ready, you know, in case we have a room of 100 people or something. But you know, face-to-face conversation, that's good. So okay, cool. So yeah, there you go, new tool for you to know about. So so we can do this a number of different ways. It's set up as a Q&A. So if you have questions for me or for the group or whatever, we can definitely do that. But I know that you all probably didn't like sit up last night agonizing over what questions you wanted to ask me in this session. You know, so if you don't think of any questions, I've kind of prepared some stuff that we can chat about related to the keynote, related to other stuff, and then of course, you know, we're going to just talk about whatever. That's kind of what this is all about, you know. So I've got some pre-decided questions that we can all discuss related to the keynote. I have a new book coming out pretty soon. Have any of you heard of Teach Like a Pirate by Dave Burgess? Yeah. If you haven't, it's all about student engagement. He says, don't just teach a lesson, create an experience. And so it's a lot around that. And so I'm writing, there's been a whole bunch of other pirate spin-off books, you know, Learn Like a Pirate, Lead Like a Pirate. And so I'm going to write one called Tech Like a Pirate. The manuscript is done. It's in copy editing right now as we speak. I actually have, let's see if I can find it real quick. That's what the current version of the cover looks like. It may even look a little bit different when it actually comes out. But we can talk about that too, using technology in the classroom, the meaning of life, what it's like to live in Indiana. Don't ask about that. Although I did meet somebody here from Lancaster, and we were talking about how, you know, in Lancaster there's lots of Amish, right? I'm in a little bitty county in Indiana where there's a large Amish population. So we were talking about how a traffic jam for us is like a tractor, a pickup truck, and 2 Amish buggies. Like, hey, story of my life right there, you know? So anyway, so yeah, we'll just start with, does anybody have any questions or anything that you want to talk about? I don't know if anybody came prepared with questions. Sir?
So, I was drawn to your work, dish that homework.
Oh, yeah.
Can you talk about where, kind of, and you sort of addressed it in the keynote a little bit, where the origins of that idea came from?
Yeah.
The need to move in that direction, and how you made or have made that, how you made that transition to a classroom.
Yeah, yes, I would love to talk about that. So the book he's referencing is Ditch That Homework, which I co-authored with Alice Keeler, who was a keynote at the conference, last year, the year before or something? Yeah. So with both of us, we had kind of a similar story, but it was out of 2 different content areas. I taught high school Spanish, she taught high school math. And in 2 very different parts of the world too. She was from Fresno, California, you know, very urban. I was in little middle of nowhere Indiana, you know, very rural. But for me, I know, you know, I started off, and like you said in the keynote, I talked about teaching very traditionally, you know, by the textbook, chapter by chapter worksheets at the end, workbook pages, and sending some of that stuff home because nobody ever really teaches you how to do homework, you know, how to like assign homework. You know, it's not like a required course in your teacher prep program, you know. So I just kind of did what had been done to me. And after several years of doing that, I started looking at it and I was going, man, these assignments, first of all, these assignments are not great assignments. Kids would come back and they would do the bare minimum. 10 questions, I got 10 words on that page, and that was it, you know. And I looked at that and I thought, I assigned it, I'm giving points for it, but how much learning is actually coming out of it, you know? This is where I was still sort of existentially like grappling with, why are we doing this, you know? Then I started to look deeper into the grade book. And in my grade book, I started to see this divide. Because there were the kids that always did the homework. You guys familiar with this? You know, the kids that always do the homework. They're the ones that don't really need the homework. But they're the ones who were always doing it. They were getting all of the points. And I started to see that their grades, if I wanted to look at what their mastery was, and then look at what their actual grades in the grade book were, their grades were starting to get artificially elevated, a little bit above their mastery. Then you had the kids who didn't do the homework. They were probably the ones that needed it the most, but they were the ones that just wouldn't do it, you know, for whatever reason. There's a whole host of reasons, many of which I didn't know. And I started to see that their mastery, a lot of times, it was showing lower than what they were actually doing. And then I also noticed that there was like a socioeconomic divide in there too, you know. There were kids who didn't have the support at home. I mean, just all of that stuff. And I started looking at it and I'm going, I don't think I can do this anymore. And I started to weigh, what are they getting out of it versus how much time is being used. And I thought, if we're investing time the same way that we would invest money, if we look at it as an investment, we're putting a lot of time into this with not a whole lot of return. If you put a whole bunch of money into an investment, you want it to give you a return. But we're putting all of this time into it and we're getting like teeny tiny amounts of return. And I was just like, just little by little by little. I didn't, you know, when I said in the keynote that there was one moment when we put the textbooks up, it wasn't that way with the homework. I just found myself slowly, constantly giving less and less and less and less of it until I turned around one time and I'm like, I'm given a homework assignment in 2 weeks. Are these kids struggling because of that? I'm looking, you know, around at their, you know, their mastery, their skills in class and everything, and I'm going, I don't think they're worse for not having done this. And so, I mean, on and on and on I could go about this, but that's kind of the origin story with me. And then I met Alice, who, you know, taught math in middle school and high school, and she was talking about the kids that she had that, you know, they didn't know where mom and dad were that night. They had to work another job to make sure that they kept the light bill on. It was like math homework was the last thing on their priority list, and for good reason. So that's kind of the origin story of the whole thing. She and I were looking at it like, you know, some teachers will give homework and they will talk about the positive gains that kids get out of it, and it's really good. We found that they were in the minority. And so with all of the other ones, we just wanted to provide something. You know, it's like, if you're not getting the results that you want out of homework, what could you do instead? And that's really, you know, that's really where it all came from, and we just started brainstorming ideas on that. So, yeah. What's been your experience with it?
So I teach 8th grade language arts, and on our team, I sort of, this is kind of like year 3 of really making an effort to not do homework in school. And my teaching team has, to varying degrees, a math teacher who's here in another session, to varying degrees have tried to, and for the most part to great effect. Like on open house nights, we will say that to the group of parents, and for the most part, there's like nods in the room. Like parents are really happy about it, but there are also, and we teach in a high achieving school, a high achieving district. But there is also that minority that we spoke about, are also can be vocal, and can be resistant to that kind of change. And it's not negatively impacting the students who, I don't see it as negatively impacting the students who are, you know, cushioning their grade. But if we get resistance, and sometimes it's coming from parents who will say, well, they're gonna get homework in high school. Like our colleagues at the high school are not following this model. I guess what I'm looking for is just how you deal with that transition in terms of communicating that to parents. And from what you described about your community, I don't mean to, I have no idea obviously, but
that's okay.
I envision a population of folks whose school has always been a certain way, and you're changing it. And it worked for me. Why are you changing this? Something.
What'd you say?
That's America.
It's America. Yeah, it is. It
when I
is.
was in school, this is how it is.
Yeah.
My
And see-
husband says that. I'm like, honey, it's really?
But there's some people who say
She's
school
not
is
as long
terrible.
as her. She's like
That school is terrible. Why are you changing it?
And that's part of the battle that we have to fight, isn't it? Is a perception battle. It's like whenever parents know what they did in school, it's like you start to get this thought of, I did this and this and this and this, and that's the way that school must be, and I am a fine, well-adjusted human being, so that must be the way that we need to do it. And if it looks different than that, and That's so interesting that you mentioned the population that you work with, because I was just telling someone earlier, we've heard people talk about huge buy-in, especially in schools where, you know, there's high poverty. You know, a lot of times with them, it's like I was saying with Alice, you know, homework falls down the priority list. There's not as much, you know, there's a lot of times not the same kind of support. But in some of those real high achieving areas, I saw this once, I did a presentation like in San Jose, California, like just a few miles away from Google and, you know, and Cupertino and Apple and everything. And so a lot of those Silicon Valley parents, this is what the teachers at the school were telling me. They said, you know, they're hard drivers. They're the ones who will take their kids to cello practice at 6:30 a.m. Then they'll go to elementary school, and they'll be all day in elementary school, and then they'll go to soccer practice, and then they'll do the book club, and then at the end of the night, they want them to do about an hour of homework, and then maybe they can go to bed. And again, it's that perception thing. Like, you know, all of us, I think, know in this room, that's not how elementary kids learn. And I mean, it's a recipe for burnout. And I think that, I'm trying to remember, you said something that triggered something that you could say. I'm trying to remember what it was. I don't know, maybe it'll still come back to me. But I think that, you know, I really think, and there, you know, there's some research that backs this up too, that at some point, I think of it like trying to cut a tree down with an axe. You know, we're chopping on that tree all day long. And eventually, if you chop on that tree long enough, your blade is going to get dull. And you can keep hacking at that tree after a while, and you're not making much change, but you're putting in an awful lot of effort. And at some point, as Stephen Covey said, you know, in his 7 Habits for Highly Effective People, at some point you've got to sharpen the saw. And that's, you know, that's a lot of, oh gosh, we could go on and on about homework, but yeah, and I'm, you know, more you want to chat about this, absolutely. And if does anybody else have, and again, we can keep going on that, or we can switch gears, or whatever. Oh wow, we got a couple of you. Okay, I saw this hand first, I'm gonna come right over to you. Go ahead.
I guess it's kind of short. I'm a year into officially sending no homework, but it's been years since I've really, this year it's been very vocal. No homework. And I love, the kids love it. I'm just as far in my curriculum as I have ever been.
Yep.
So many positives to it.
Yep.
One struggle I have is absences. And if you have tips or tricks, is there anything creative?
Oh, yeah.
It can be very tedious to try to put something either up on an LMS every day, or to touch base and so tips and tricks.
Do they know like what they missed, or what do you mean by that?
How do you create? Okay, so looking at his lesson and he's standing there putting the clothes on and doing everything, and the kids are engaged. You can't recreate.
You can't bottle that. You're right.
Recording yourself, and no kid's gonna go home and watch 40 minutes of my class if I'm not like doing a full-on production.
Yeah.
It's
right.
It's a tough trick. So
and trying to duplicate that with, I'm going to set up a camera in my class and we're going to record that and then you're going to go watch it. It's like, you're right, it's not the same. Did you have something on that? Yeah, let me hear it.
Have you
Curious.
considered a flipped classroom?
Oh yeah, flipped classroom. I mean, yeah, but again,
it kind of goes against the no homework. Like a flipped classroom essentially is like you're go home and do it and come back and
and there's a thing we talk about in the class. See, I like the kind of the direction we're going with this, and there's, you know, especially if you do flip class really well and you do it with like little short videos that they can watch, and then those resources are available and they can access them anytime. That's huge. But like you were saying, if you want to cut down on the homework, then making it digital go home and watch videos homework is not a whole lot different than what we had before. So there's another model we talk about in the Ditch That Homework book called the in-class flip. And the idea, there's a little infographic with it. I mean, just simply, the idea is that you try to boil your instruction down into short little instructional videos that they can watch. And they have those resources available if they need them, when they need them, so that they can be an additional support. And so it's almost like a cycle. You know, like you'll get some of that learning, then you'll go try it and see how it goes. If it goes well, we've got some extra activities for you to continue. If it doesn't go well, we can go back to those videos if we need to. And but to your point, you know, some of the things that we do in class just can't be replicated. I really felt that way as a Spanish teacher. We would knock our computers over when they were sitting on, well, hopefully not. What we would do with these stories I was telling you about, I'm not going to video those because half of it is being there and being in the moment. So, for me, my answer to that was best alternative I can come up with is I'm going to come up with some sort of activity that gets you the repetitions that you missed, and just understand that when you're in class, you're going to get the best experience. I also know, I was talking about Teach Like a Pirate from Dave Burgess. He would talk about how sometimes...
Sometimes go back, and it doesn't change anything for the homework, but it's
Right.
definitely been a struggle.
Yeah.
I wanted to say it's an honor to be here with you, Matt. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. You're one of a handful of Twitter role models.
Thank you.
I love your newsletter. I had thought about homework, and I had sort of two different thoughts to address it. One time I tried to look into why do we give homework, and I found that it's to minimize the time between learning experiences.
Yeah.
So that's one reason why the people originally gave homework at night, so there's a smaller gap between access and information. And I think of I think of homework as practice.
Sure.
And I try to communicate to kids, this is an opportunity to practice. We don't, hopefully none of us are assessing homework or anything like that. But it's just another time, like if you had any other activity, hobby you got into, if you felt like you needed additional time to practice, you would spend some time, if you had it, to practice. And the other thought I had was, like, I think it gets into what your practice is with grading. If you have a traditional grading scale, you're 10% for homework or 20%, well then you're going to have homework and grading. But if you're moving more towards something like competency-based scale, then having homework and grading homework.
Yeah, because there's other ways to show proficiency in those skills, right? And I think even with I'm so glad you brought up all of that stuff actually, but with the grades, it's like if you've got 10% or 20% or whatever for homework, that can even start to shift too, because when you start to think of it as practice, it's like, I'm from Indiana, we love basketball in Indiana, right? My son is a big basketball player, and if he wants to be better at shooting free throws, he will go practice on free throws. Once he gets to a point where he's really good at free throws, he might not practice on it as much, but he still does want to get it so that he doesn't lose that, It's just like what you were saying. If you start to look at homework as an opportunity to practice because you know that you need it, that's a huge shift, I think. And what that also does is that also helps kids to start self-assessing, doesn't it? They start to take part in it, not because everybody got 20 questions on this worksheet because you think everybody needs it, but they're starting to go, okay, I struggled with this in class, I want to do well on this test, or I struggled with this in class, I want to understand this. So what extra practice do we need, Love that, yeah. So yeah, I'm totally on board with you on that too. And I like that you brought up that, one of the original reasons for homework, and thank goodness we get back to some of the original reasons, because sometimes we just do things for the sake of doing them because everybody's done them before, was to cut down on that delay between the first time and the second time. And there's lots of neuroscience research that backs up, they call it spacing, and there's a certain amount of spacing that you want to have before your next time with that. And it's like my take on that is that if you want to do that, it's kind of like what you were saying. There are better and more efficient ways to do it than sending out, repetitive worksheets for everybody to do. So it could be something as simple as like Quizlet flashcards or a quizzes game or whatever. And if we want to get those, then that could get those quick repetitions in 5 minutes in one evening, and then we call it a night. It just depends on what it is, but all of that. That was spot on. Loved it. Absolutely. Anybody else on we can keep talking about homework, or we could go on to something else, or whatever. We're about halfway. So, anything else on that? change topics. Yes, what you got?
So looking at like your blogging, your podcasting,
Yes.
the one-pagers, which
Yes.
are all fantastic.
Yes.
How do you select topics that you are going to start writing about or blogging about or podcasting about? Because I'm a tech integrator for my high school to support the teachers and students, and I do a little newsletter, and I always find like I try to pick like what does admin want us to support, what kind of things are we paying for as a district that maybe we need to like add some of those nuggets in. But then when it comes to like other broader concepts that are important, like highlighting certain things, like how do you narrow that down to like, I want to talk about this, and also how do I keep that concise where people are going to actually read it?
Oh gosh, yeah, that's tough, you know. And I will say, after having done an email newsletter and a blog for 6 years now or something, I just looked at it and I've almost got 700 posts on my blog at this point. Like, I've been doing it for a long time, and there are definitely those times, which you can probably sympathize with, where I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to talk about this week, you know? It's like I'm totally lost on that. As far as picking topics, you know, with me, I'm kind of selfish about it a little bit. It's like whatever I'm really interested in, or whatever I see, because I'm fortunate that I get to go do professional development in different places, so I can go see how that's going and what people are talking about and what people need, you know. And so getting to hear some of that is good, but some of it really is just what I'm curious about, what I want to learn more about, what I hear people talking about. My wife is a high school social studies teacher, and so she's an interesting filter for me, because I'm kind of like this starry-eyed dreamer optimist person, you know, and I'll tell my wife I'm going to write about this, and she's like, oh, that means that's not going to go over very well. Like, she keeps me like super grounded. So, you know, getting some of those you know, trusted other people is good. Twitter, of course, you know, I mean, social media, seeing what people are talking about is all good. I'm on a big kick right now. See, I think when I started doing this, I was real excited about the technology and what the technology could do, and now I'm starting to kind of reverse that a little bit and go, what is the good solid learning that can be improved by the technology? Or let's just throw the technology out and let's just ask, what's the good solid learning? Like, I really feel like we're kind of turning a corner where we've talked for so many years about what are the devices, what are the tools, what are the apps, what do they do? And we're starting to get a little bit of a grasp on that. And there's so much information out there where we can get that answered. I think the big question that I think we should be grappling with maybe is, what are the learning practices behind all of that stuff that makes that stuff succeed? That's the stuff that I'm really fascinated in right now, just because I'm starting to see that shift, that turn, you know? So that's why I talked about retrieval practice in the keynote, you know? Personally, I am fascinated by brain science, by neuroscience, cognitive science, whatever you want to call it. You know, the stuff that science is showing is the way that the brain learns. I'm getting into, you know, like nerdy pedagogy stuff, you know, Webb's depth of knowledge, revised Bloom's taxonomy, universal design for learning, UVD, like, you know, all of that nerdy stuff. And what I like to do is I like to learn about that and then not try to turn around and write a blog post about it, or not try to turn around and do a session on it. Have you ever tried to host a session at a conference like this on understanding by design? Don't. I mean, you'll have maybe a few people that show up, but a lot of times that stuff kind of scares people off, you know? So I've started to take this like approach in my writing and my newsletters and my sessions and everything of, I'm going to learn about that stuff. And I'm going to insert a couple little pieces of it into that session so they get exposed to it. They'll come to a session about 10 cool ways to use Google Slides, or here's how you use this tool to engage your students, and they'll show up for that because that's what they want. But then I'm going to squeeze a little bit of that nerdy pedagogy stuff in as a way of saying, this is why this works. I just kind of went in circles on all that. Did I touch on anything that was helpful in that? Was it good?
I like, it's hiding the nuggets of that.
Yes.
Into,
yes.
Like the sparkly shiny, because we're still fairly new in our 1-to-1, and still the sparkly shiny is like the sizzle, and somebody comes to me, oh, I found this great app, and I'm like, have you? Is it great? Can we talk about it? And then it's like hiding those little pieces is helpful. Yeah. For understanding, like, why are we using the sparkly shiny?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And some of it is sparkly and shiny, and sometimes sparkly and shiny is good, but like, it's like you said, you know, how we use the sparkly and shiny has all to do with it, doesn't it? There's a image that I use. I almost said it earlier, but then I realized I have learned over time, the image uses meatloaf. And I've learned that people don't like meatloaf as much as apparently my family does. My kids kind of like meatloaf. So I always joke about how my professional development and my posts and all that are like when your mom makes meatloaf, but she grinds up cauliflower and broccoli and she mixes it into the meatloaf, so it's a little bit more nutritional, but you can't even taste it, you know? That's kind of, I don't know, that's kind of the way that I started trying to do that. But the meatloaf approach doesn't have the, you know, flashy name recognition and other things. I use the meatloaf approach. Meatloaf, right? Anybody have anything else? Any questions? Things we can discuss? Yes.
This is just kind of random, but
sure.
How long? I was kind of curious because I mean you were a teacher before.
Right.
How long did you blog and maybe or podcast while still teaching? Which is kind of really fascinating. You have 3 kids, like how you that all happen.
Yep.
It's just that's interesting to me.
Yeah. I'd love to talk about that. I started my blog I think I started it in 2011, and I did the thing that a lot of people do with blogging, is I was really excited about it right then. I wrote 3 posts in 1 week, then I wrote 2 posts next week, then I wrote 2 posts next week, and then it was 1, and then it was 1, and then it was 1 every couple weeks, and then it was over. And so it sat dormant for a while. And I think a lot of times people will do that stuff and they'll subscribe to the I'm going to write when I'm inspired approach. That doesn't work. Because things get in the way and you don't end up doing it, you know. But in 2012, I picked it back up and I decided I'm going to write a post. Whether I am inspired or not, whether I have something to write about or not, I will write a post every Monday and every Thursday. 500 words was my goal. 500 words twice a week worked for me. I was a journalism major in college. Worked on the high school newspaper and yearbook and worked journalism jobs all through college. I actually thought I was going to be a newspaper reporter when I got out of school. That lasted 3 months and I went back to school. But I do have that like writing bug, so that was what worked for me. But I stuck to a schedule, and I knew that if I broke that schedule, it was all going to go off the rails, and I would never get it back. So I blogged religiously twice a week without fail, except in the summer, for 2 or 3 years before I broke, and that helped.
And while still teaching, that was also.
While still teaching, yes. From 2012 to 2015, I was still teaching. And so what I would do is, since it was, 500-word blog post in the morning, I got up at 5:30 in the morning. And the house was quiet, which was fantastic. And I would come downstairs from my bedroom. I'd sit on the couch in the living room. Usually, in the winter, I would get like an Afghan. My computer would start up. It was slow to start up. It took like a minute. So I'm like sitting there trying to get 1 more minute of sleep while my computer's starting up. And then I would sit there and I would type it. I'd throw an image on it and I would go tweet it out. And then at 7 o'clock, when it was time for everybody, or 6:45 or whatever. And so I just, did that. It's, that idea of you make time for what you make time for, And so, and for a while there, I was blogging, writing, trying to share it wherever I could. Had an email newsletter that would go out whenever I would publish something new, and it was like crickets. Nobody. I remember one time in particular, we were on Christmas break. My grandparents lived in Florida, so we took a trip down there to see them. Got like a house for all of my family and extended family to stay in. And so here I am, 8 o'clock in the morning, nobody else is up. I'm here in Florida on Christmas break, writing a blog post, looking at the statistics and going, nobody's reading this. What in the world am I doing? And at some point, just after, sticking with it little by little, other people started noticing it. And the great thing is that you don't have to have a big following to help people. The big following is not the important part. The fact that I got to see somebody tweet me or email me every once in a while and say, hey, this thing that you wrote about, I tried it and it worked. I was like, that was huge for me. Because when I was early on teaching, there were a handful of those teacher bloggers out there that published on a regular basis, and they were so helpful to me. And I thought, they've been so helpful to me, it's my turn now, So that's, But it was, I mean, you're right, having 3 kids and, writing at 5:30 in the morning twice a week, it's hard, but I just kept feeling the weight of, I need to share because somebody else shared. That was huge for me, so, yeah.
So going back, how did that transition then into your books?
So I had been blogging for about 2 or 3 years, I think. Again, I was on that Monday, Thursday thing. And I saw Dave Burgess, who wrote the book Teach Like a Pirate. He's my publisher. So I saw him at a conference. He was the keynote speaker there. And I was presenting there. And so I sat in the audience and watched him and was like, oh, this is so cool. He's so good at this. And so I left the conference, and on the way home, I'm like kicking myself. I'm going, why didn't I go up and talk to him? Why didn't I go ask him about all of this stuff, Because I liked just doing what we're doing here, going to conferences and sharing what works with me in the classroom. And I thought, if I can do a little bit more of that, I would love that, I love connecting with people and getting to share ideas and hearing what they're doing. So I went home and I emailed him. And I said, do you have any advice for somebody who wants to do a little more of this, who's just really enjoying it? And he sends me an email. See, I thought maybe I might get an email back from him and be like 2 lines. Stick with it, kid, you'll be fine. And he sends me this big long email, and at the end of it, he says, we need to get on a video call and talk about this. And I was like, Dave Burgess wants to get on a video call with me. Oh my gosh! And so he gets on this call and he says, okay, I'm familiar with your blog, I'm familiar with what you've been doing. He said, I know this sounds crazy, talking to the ditch that textbook guy. I think you need to write a book. And I was like, who would publish me? I don't have any contacts in the publishing world. I don't know anybody. I hardly know people that have published books. And he goes, I'll do it. That was right at the beginning, right? Because now he's published almost 100 books. This was like right at the beginning, totally unknown quantity. And so that was an easy yes. And so I just started pulling some of the stuff that I'd written in the blog together along with some new content, and that became Ditch That Textbook, the first book. I talked to him in August. I had a manuscript ready for him in October, which is freakishly long. Freakishly short. August to October is freakishly short, but I had a lot of it written in the blog already. The book was available in March, so it all kind of came together quickly. Does that answer your question? Is that the route you wanted me to go with that? Okay, cool, yeah, very good.
Yeah, so I was a classroom teacher, different subjects, age levels, for many years, and this year I moved into an integrator role. And it's I face a lot of resistance, as you can imagine. Which I didn't expect, I didn't expect it to be so hard.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you can even elaborate or if you probably don't, but what suggestions do you have
that's such a tough relationship dynamic, isn't it? Are any of the rest of you like tech integrators or coaches or anything like that? Okay. It's tricky. And see, I get it too from when I go and do professional development at places, I'm kind of like the hired gun. You know, I come in and I talk for a day and then I leave, and it's easy for them to ignore me if they want to, because I'll be gone soon. But in a coach or a tech integrator role, you're around, you know, and it's hard to, because, you know, if you think of the classroom teacher, just trying to put my finger on this question, you know, you think of the classroom teacher and it's like they're doing the best that they can, and now they feel like there's this person who is trying to tell them that it's like if they perceive it wrong, they start to feel like you're trying to tell them that they're not doing their job well enough, you know? And so trying to set that relationship up is so hard. And then especially when they're like, and there's that resistance, and I don't think there's any silver bullet to it. There's a couple things that I found that have helped for me anyway, and I'm curious to see what you're doing too. One is, I think, whenever other people in the school or the school district or the grade level are doing really great things, sometimes shining a light on what they do is so huge. I found that even the most hardened heart of a teacher, you know, if they're over here in their own classroom and they find out that they're in this classroom, but the teacher down the hall right over here is doing something that could really help them, now all of a sudden it's not the tech integrator who's doing this. I know you don't do this, but sometimes they feel like that even if we try not to. But that person over there, they're a regular teacher, just like me. And if that actually worked for them, then hey, you know, I think there's that. What was the other thing? There was something else I was going to suggest. This one's kind of obvious, but I found that sometimes people jump the gun on this, I think, that sometimes we try to impose what we want them to do instead of asking them what their goals are. And like, what are you trying to accomplish with this? And let's see if we can find different ways to do that. You know, coming on board with them and helping them reach their goals, you know. Those are at least two of the things that I've found. Not to say that you're not doing all of those things, you know, but what about you? What have you found that has worked? Did you hear that big sigh?
Not much. I mean, I think it's a big difference is time frame.
Yeah.
You know, this is leadership is very traditionally been there for a long time.
Yeah.
They talk about like 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
3 to 5 years. And I think coming from a classroom where I usually had control of what I could do in my room, and then moving into
Yeah, but I'm on that tomorrow. You
Right.
know, like not 35
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
moving into like being a STEM teacher, and there's all this exciting stuff,
Yeah.
and I had support by my administrators, and I could just do it.
Yeah.
Now the administrators are on a different time frame. They're thinking like next year. They're overwhelmed with their tasks right now, so
You're like, no, now, right? Or soon at least.
right, and as someone like I'm sure you see, like and most of us see, like these things will help you be more efficient and have more fun. It's not so I don't I find myself just accepting that it's a time frame thing, and they're all overwhelmed. Everyone's overwhelmed with all the responsibilities they have, and I feel like I have to just accept, at least at this school, I can say that, sort of accept that things are going to move very, very slowly.
Yeah.
But I struggle with that.
I totally get that. I think the more that they realize that you really are on their side and that you really are trying to make their lives better and in turn the kids' lives better, and sometimes that's a long selling process. You know, it's a long sell to get them to get there, but like, yeah, the long.
From a teacher perspective, so I mean, I'm actually here with one of our tech coaches, and we have a great relationship, and I've just kind of watched them come into the district, and there's 2 of them in our district, and I think that as the more people have realized how valuable sessions are with them, and they've worked to really build relationships with teachers, where they've made it a point to say, I mean, I don't know how your role is set up, but in our district, they're on a teacher contract. We're teachers. We are not administrators.
Yeah.
Our job is not to come into the classroom and to point the fingers
Right.
at what you're doing or not doing.
Yep.
And I think, they are well liked in our district, but it's taken a while.
Yeah.
It's taken a good probably 3 to 5 years for people to kind of figure out.
Mhm.
There you go.
Oh no, the 3 to 5 years again. No.
And I'm not trying to make you feel horrible about that, but I think just
Yeah.
the relationship piece of it is huge.
Yeah.
And people value them and know that they're on the side.
Yeah.
Are you involved in your local IU's PIC or Pennsylvania Institute for Instructional Coaching? Because
I'm in Philadelphia.
so I think out that way, I think statewide there's a PIC program, and it usually runs through like your local IU. It's been awesome to start not thinking of myself as like, here's the tech component, but like again, that's sneaking in those little like pedagogical things, and learning about like instructional coaching and how to connect with teachers and build those relationships that will get you in the door to go from here's somebody reaching out to me for troubleshooting, like this app isn't working, what do I do, or what's the great website for this, and segueing that into something more valuable. PIC has really helped me develop that and to make some of those changes. It is a slow process, and then by the time you build that relationship, like the district's steering in a different way in a different direction, as it will continue to progress for eons. But looking into PIC as an option, I think was really helpful for me to overcome that like feeling of like misery when people aren't responding or people are being negative, and finding the person that like does want your support and help and focusing on that, and then the conversation will start because that person will talk to somebody else and then those people will talk to somebody else, and then your calendar's booked and you're like, what did I get myself into?
Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
But I've been at it for 3 years, and it took probably 2 years to get to one. Working with teachers.
Thank you. Real quick, PICK?
PIIC.
Yeah. Did you have something? And then I see your hand too.
Your story when you did the clothing or thing made me think of something is the principal walking by.
Oh yeah.
And that feeling of like, I think every teacher has fraud syndrome, that we're afraid that any moment somebody's gonna walk in and go, you're terrible at this and you're working your butt off and like you're a total fraud, you know what you're doing. And so that's part of like that protectiveness that we're all afraid of when someone comes, an instructional coach comes in and goes, here's what you're doing.
Yeah.
My quick story would be when I first started with a wonderful gifted teacher who would push in with some of our accelerated students, and she would come in and I was like, I'd love to have your input, but I feel like you are so far above me right now in your experience. So one thing that she did was so awesome, and that could be something that's not 3 to 5 years down the road, that's like this week, is build a menu of like 4 or 5 things that you have to offer to implement and that you think could be really great for someone, and go to your most open-minded teacher, somebody who's doing cool stuff, and go, I have this like chunk of stuff, does anything like this sound good? Do you want to collaborate? Do you want to help me build something? And then if it goes well, say, can you recommend me to another teacher who would like to do this?
Recommendations.
And then, and then get that. And that's what she did. She did such a good job. And it did not, she always ran into people who were like, nope, please get out of my room, but she was so great at it. I'm so appreciative of her.
That's really good. We have one right back here, and then I'll come to you.
Well, as an administrator, I would concur with you that the very first thing we implemented coaching in our district as well, and I was the principal at the time. PIC is phenomenal. Your idea of a menu is also very good. One of the things that our coaches did the very first time, because I had to dictate that professional learning, but I sat with them when they did it, which was helpful, because I gave them time during the day to do it, but your administrator needs to buy in. But one way you can do that is, we always gave food. Like we did literally did a menu where we had an open house over lunchtime, and they sat up, or they would set up their apps or whatever, and made it huge, but we fed them. And candy is always good. we had a spread like a football, spread. So
A Super Bowl party almost.
yeah.
Yes.
And you could call it your app party or whatever you would like, but that really got to buy in. And then, so they started with them, and then, well, then they started recommending. But I will tell you, it does take that amount of time. I mean, once you get your administrator on board, you're in good shape. But PIC is the key to any good coach, in my opinion.
That's good. Very good. And John, can I just say real quick, thank you for throwing this question out and being vulnerable, that we get a chance to talk about this, and know that we're not, I'm sure you can probably pick up on this, we're not all like saying, oh, poor John, we've got to help him. Well, we want to help you out, but like, this isn't like, we're just glad that we get to talk about it. Did you have something too?
I was just going to also approach administration. So when you hear that a lot of it has to do with history on it in 3 to 5 years, I think it's more of a perspective of when that's delivered. At least for me, my instant thought is, okay, how do I develop that in that time? How do I get these people on this now? Because I share your enthusiasm. When you know that there's something that's going to benefit our kids in such a rapid way, you want to press that button, and you want like an easy button. Where is it? How can we make it happen? So on our end, it's figuring that out with the entire staff, and that's where a lot of that timing and planning and making that service opportunities, contractor hours, and all of those things. So I don't know if you've done this yet. Figure out a plan. Like, create a document. This is my 3 to 5 year plan. And then it may not be your time administrator, but find somebody to share that with. To say, this is where I think I see this going. And then, like everyone else is suggesting, find those few teachers who are as enthusiastic as you, and share your plan with them. Say, listen, this is what I'm thinking. What do you think? Get their buy-in, and then say, okay, will you help me pilot this? And then just try it, because they know people who are enthusiastic, and they know people who are enthusiastic. And as long as your administrator, at least in my experience, has an umbrella of this is what we're going to do, this is why we're going to do it, and this is how I want it to work, then you go make that happen and find your little bit of report back. Let me know how it's going. But your problem might also be you may not have that support from your admin. If you don't, find another administrator that you can talk to. Not about your building, not about your administrator, but just, hey, this is what I want to do. How does that look for you? What do you think? Can you give me some insight on what I might need to tweak? Or if you were presented with this, how do you think that would work? They might be able to do that.
That's so good. This presentation is called A Discussion with Matt Miller and all of our encouragement for John.
Sorry to take up.
No, it was great. It was great. Do you have a last word on it real quick as we switch to something else? Or?
Well, it's good for me to hear validated. It's good to hear validation. It's good to hear that that these things are common. The PIC program I wasn't familiar with.
Okay.
That seems great. A lot of great ideas.
Yeah, thank you for throwing the question out. I think it was good for all of us to get to talk about this. Okay, we got about 7 minutes left. Yes?
About your talk this week.
Yes.
So, your 3 nuggets.
Yes.
Your scientific method.
Yes.
Which tweak a little bit, but that's all right. You're an artist, you do your thing, you have your dream, you sculpt it, you go from there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're a maverick, you take your risk.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe because I'm a first year teacher, I feel like it's a no duh for people, but like, why do I have this feeling that it's like, I already do this in my classroom. Am I missing something?
So, your question is, these were the 3 key takeaways from your speech, and shouldn't this be the way that we're doing it anyway?
Yes.
Yeah. That is actually a good, honest, fair question. Here's what I found, that in all of the schools where I've done that keynote, and I've talked about these very things, I found a couple of things. Is that there are kind of a minority who are already doing those things who feel the way that you do. And the reason I continue to give this speech and continue to say these things is to some extent validation, to remind you that yes, this is the way that it is supposed to be done. Because sometimes, it's so hard when you get stuck in your one classroom and you don't see what anybody else is doing, and all of a sudden you start to feel like the freak because this is not the way that education was done to you. Because that's not the way that education was done to you, probably, right? If it was, then great. If it was, then great. Okay. There's a bunch. I'd say there are some of them out there that will do this a little bit to some extent, and different little tidbits of that presentation will encourage them to take the next step. So there's that. Then there's also, sadly, not so much at this place. Whenever I'll go to a school district and everybody has to be there, I'll find more of the ones that tune it out and are like, this isn't for me. This isn't, I'm not, no. It seems like in all of our discussions during this hour, resistance is one of the things that keeps coming up. And I found with those folks, I struggle the most with them because whenever I'm in a room like this, first of all, one of them always ends up sitting here. Probably because they came in late and that was the only seat left. And so they sit there with their arms crossed with a scowl on their face. And it's like the whole time I have to sit there and look at that. But they're the ones, it's like, we want to change them. I would love to hear any of your takes on this. I've wrestled with this because we want to change them. We want to, I hate to say it this way, we want to fix them, right? Isn't that the way that we feel? We want to do that. It's sometimes, it's like they didn't come for me. They didn't come for you. They didn't come for that reason. They didn't come to be changed. So there's only so much we can do with them. I found that that's kind of the spectrum. And so I think, to answer what I think your question is about, duh, right? In a nice way, duh, right? There are maybe little nuances of that duh that let you see it a little bit differently, maybe. But mostly just to remind all of us who work in these silos every single day. This classroom, I don't get to see what other people are doing and what other great teachers, what does that look like? Just as that reminder that, hey, this is how it's supposed to look, I think that's my best answer to that, yes.
I think a lot of times as teachers, especially we were at a private school and we have teachers that have been teaching 4th grade for 42 years and 3rd grade for 38 years.
Yep.
I think we get comfortable and complacent.
Mm-hmm.
So next year, I'm a part-time teacher, part-time administrator.
Yep.
So next year we're going to switch it up and we're going to change the grades that people teach.
Mm-hmm.
And you may never see me again because I'll be like dumping notions somewhere.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
I think you need to be out of your comfort zone. You need to be able to be made to do something that you haven't done in 43 years. You know what I mean? To come up with new ideas and new things. Because I have these lesson plans I've used this whole time and they work and they're great. And why am I changing it? So if we can change your atmosphere, and force you to do something new, different, and exciting, then we'll see what happens.
Yeah. And there's that whole, the proverbial you can't lead a horse, or you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink, Like we can create.
Throw it in.
What's that?
We'll throw it in.
Or throw it in, that's right. Certainly it'll drink a little bit in there. But like, there's that whole idea of creating the certain conditions around it in hopes that it soaks in and some of that change starts to happen. There's a little bit of that too, yes?
I was going to say, to add on to it.
Yes, please.
You can't lead the horse to water, but you can lead it around the river forever, make it thirsty.
Yes.
So if you really want to get it in, just keep going around them until they're thirsty enough to do it.
Yeah. Boy, we could go deep on that analogy, couldn't we? Yeah. Jim?
The feedback the gentleman in the front row
Yeah.
said, we did this very similar thing in our school this year. I'm a principal of a small elementary school in northeastern PA, 300 kids. But we find that, and the resistance is always with seemingly to me, is with but this is how we've always done it, this has always worked for me. And then when you have the first year teachers who come in and they're used to new methodologies and more innovative ways of doing things and approaches, I find, in my experience, those teachers are the ones that are the ones who are willing to, adopt the changes and implement the new initiatives. Where it's, and I don't wanna throw the veteran teachers under the bus.
Right.
But those teachers that have been teaching fourth grade for 30 years, 25, 30 years plus, they're the ones that are resistant. So we did do that this year. And I'm gonna tell you what, now it's February, I'm still experiencing people who are just not buying in, that are just struggling with the change. Now there are some that are like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do it. But there are some that are just, so when you say you might not be here next year, that may be true.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you mentioned too, this one little piece of all that you just said is that you didn't want to throw the veteran teachers under the bus. And that's,
it's not all of them.
You're exactly right. Yeah, it's like, and to follow up on that, like, we've all probably seen some of those teachers that reinvent themselves at the end, and we see some of the ones early on that are so fixed mindset, they're not going to change. But you're right. It's like that's the struggle that we're all dealing with. Last one, and then we're going to wrap up.
Yeah, real quick, and just to your point, I think the message that you gave, is sort of touches on perhaps the most important pieces of what we do. And like, as you talked earlier, like you could have talked about different applications and the newest and greatest things.
Yeah.
But the message that you chose, that's sort of great.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Do you have something real quick?
Well, I was just going to say that I think that part of it is also, kind of like the culture that you establish in your building. I mean, I'm a principal of a K-5 building, and one of the things you talk about being a maverick and taking risks, and I think that that's one of the things that I try to tell my teachers. So I'm just trying something, and recognizing that it's going to take time in order to get everyone to where you want to be, because you do have this spectrum of whether it be years of teaching or just first year in that particular grade level, but providing that culture that the risk is okay, and trying it and recognizing the successes that you had, being honest in just your reflection. And I think if you establish that culture, then you get more people to buy into, hey, I want to try this, and I feel that it's certainly not everybody, but it's even veteran teachers that will come and say, hey, I want to take this risk. This is what I want to try. And I think the more that you do that, the more likely you're going to.
Yeah, and in the schools where I've worked, and I'll bet some of you can back this up too, when you have leadership that's like that sets the tone, that's like the catalyst that makes the change happen. Whenever it's the idea of the culture, like the principal sneezes and the whole staff catches a cold, like that's, you don't have that in place, and it makes everything move so much slower. Because I've battled against those resistant leadership in my own right, and just felt like I was fighting the war by myself. So yeah, I'm so glad. I think that's probably a good place to end right there. So this has been fun. I hope you guys have enjoyed this too. I had a blast just hanging out and talking with you all. So more free stuff up here. If you want to chat more, let me know. There are copies of my books available from Barnes & Noble out there. If you get one, I'm of course happy to sign it and everything. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your conference. Thanks for coming. Thanks. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I do stickers? I was frantically looking for my phone when you were coming in.
Yeah, absolutely. Take whatever you want, as many as you want. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you so much. And I want to say, I met you at ISD. I'm sure I can sign my book when I was there. So I'm really happy to be here. I actually kind of started listening to your podcast. I love with you and Casey Bell.
Oh yeah.
And inspired to do podcasting in the classroom with my students.
Really?
I'm an 8th grade English teacher.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm actually here going to talk about podcasting in the classroom in a session tomorrow.
Oh wow.
So
cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
What'd you say? It's a late time slot, 4:45. Yeah. I looked at the time slot. I was like, everyone's going to be already at dinner at that time.
Yeah, that's the tough one.
So yeah, I would love to have you come. Yeah. I really would. So I mean, I'm excited.
That's cool. Yeah,
so thank you for being my inspiration.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad we got to chat a little bit. This is cool.
Me too. And I expect to meet more people here too, but
Hey,
was fun.
made it good for us, right?
was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah,
This
thanks.
morning was awesome.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Look forward to following you.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
If you don't mind,
Yes.
what is the name of your blog and your podcast?
Yeah.
Just so I can start
Yep.
to make up.
I'll give you one of these.
Although
Yeah.
you've removed the tribe, right?
Right,
That's
yeah,
the
I'm getting rid of
sticker.
those stickers now. Ditch that textbook
Awesome.
is the blog, and then the podcast, we decided not to use the word tribe anymore. So cut the word tribe out of that, the Google Teacher podcast, and it's like once a week, about 30 to 40 minutes or so.
Perfect.
So
Let's drive to work.
see, there you go. Yeah,
I
yeah.
got something better to listen
Taken
to.
care of. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank
We
you.
were just saying, thank you very much. We were
Yeah.
saying before,
Pleasure.
you walked in like how unfathomable it was to us that this room was important.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a part of you that like.
You said 8th grade English teacher too, right?
Right, right.
Lebanon, you're in Lebanon. Okay.
So I'm sure there's a part of you that maybe felt discouraged walking in. I hope
You
not.
know, no. This is actually pretty common for Q&A, just
Yeah.
because people don't know exactly what they're going to get. Sometimes they don't invest 1 hour of sessions into this.
100%.
I kind of expected this, and I thought we would probably have a small
That's good.
discount. And I'm thrilled about it, because I would much rather get to like talk to you guys one-on-one than like, addressing a whole room. And
Yeah,
I,
yeah.
I'm not discouraged at all. I thought
Wonderful,
it was
good.
fun. Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
No, I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you listen to his podcast too.
For sure,
And,
yeah, and everything you've written, and
Cool, thanks,
I
man.
have
Follow.
Alice signed the book. I
Oh,
feel
cool.
foolish for not bringing it.
Oh, that's okay.
No,
That's okay. Yeah.
I'm gonna be a
Yeah,
fangirl.
yeah,
Can I
my
take a
pleasure.
picture with you?
Oh, yeah, of
Would you
course.
take it? Would you
Yeah,
take it for us?
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm not a fangirl normally, but I do follow
you're fine.
your stuff, and I kind of feel weird about that.
No.
My friends are making fun of me.
No, that's okay. It's all good.
Thank you so
Cool.
much.
All right.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah. What was your name again?
Heather Kelly.
Heather. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So good to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
Look, if we bump into each other again, actually, are you heading off to lunch? Where are you
I'm
going?
gonna head to lunch. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If you've got just a second, I want to
Yeah.
chat with you about something while we walk.
I
Is that
would
okay?
love to do that.
Cool.
Do you mind signing my book really
I would
super quick?
love to. Yes.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
I don't have that one. I'm gonna have to get that.
You know what? I read some of the other spring.
Yeah.
With an I. But I had not read
But
this
you're in
one.
Yeah.
Township?
Yeah.
I live in Lancaster County.
Great.
I'm in Elanco school. I live in Elanco school district, but I work
Okay.
in Berks.
Oh, okay.
I work at Exeter Township. I don't
Oh,
know if
that's
you're familiar.
awesome. Yeah. I used to live in Muhlenberg School District.
Oh.
So I was up in that, and then I was
There's
driving
tech-
to Manheim
There's
Township.
tech coaches are here.
Yeah, they roll deep, big time to
Yeah.
these things.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Nice.
But we're, as a district, they're shifting the homework policy, and of course it's like top secret.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
talking about it. I'm like, well, can we get a little information? Like, I'm
Yeah.
going to a conference. I can print some stuff up.
When you mean
And
shifting, like
our-
they might be getting rid of it, or
I
they might.
don't know. We'll all find out
Well,
together.
you're in Township. That's like
yeah,
a little.
we'll all find out together. So, in looking at that, like,
recovering superintendent.
could this be a superintendent? Like, our superintendent hosts a book club. And so, depending on what kind of direction that takes,
Right.
Because
Yeah.
you're,
this could
Yeah.
be
you definitely,
a fantastic
Like-
now
resource.
correct me if I'm wrong, but you're definitely in that role of kind of what they had talked about, the higher performing district with parents that are more concerned about their kids having
We're like
homework to do.
really split.
Okay. That's where
we
Exeter
do have
is at
that.
right now.
You're so
We do
right.
have that echelon.
Yeah, it's
but we
like,
also have a
if
very
every-
growing
but if
big
everybody's
population
working together, it's
of
like,
People moving out from the city, kind of.
refugee
it's
EL
hard to-
students
Okay.
moving in.
Interesting. So then you have that big
we'll have-
discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots.
Yeah.
We have that big time in
It's
Exeter.
so big.
You either live in a really fancy development house and
Yes.
your parents, your
Yeah, or you're sharing an apartment that's 2 bedrooms
And the
with 3
that's the
families.
thing with
We're
boards,
sort of a
too. It's like
Reading,
we were
so
talking
people
about
are doing
yes.
anything they
perception with
possibly
homework
can
exams.
to get out of
Perception
Reading.
is
Well,
with
and that's
school
what I
boards and
see. I
schools
probably
too,
see that in
they get in their
Muhlenberg as
mind
well,
how they think
where I
things are
was
supposed to be,
yeah.
and
I used to
then
live right down the street from
sometimes
the
really
middle
bad
school.
decisions come out of that
And
because they
you
just
see,
don't
like,
get it, you know.
it's a threading light
yeah.
almost.
Hey,
If you're
good to chat with you.
for
Yeah,
better-
good to meet you too.
better
Thanks.
tidbit on
No,
that.
Muhlenberg definitely
But,
is.
yeah.
We had some people move
Because
to
it's
Exeter
so
for that
easy, like
reason.
it's just the neighboring district. It's so easy to just,
Yeah, absolutely.
you know, it's
Yeah, me
more
too.
affordable
Yeah.
for families who can't quite afford to get way out of that
Absolutely.
area.
I
But like,
understand. Now,
I
do you
moved
still live
down
in
the
Muhlenberg,
street.
or are you
No,
moved to
I moved to
Denver?
Denver.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, your neighbors.
Okay.
Oh, get out!
Seriously,
I
are you
live.
in Calico, or
Yeah, there's a
you're-
brand new development that opened behind the East Calico police station.
Yeah, I
that like started
Oh my
back
goodness.
back
I
there,
live in
but
Bowmansville. Do you know where Bowmansville
Oh,
is?
yeah,
Yes,
LA,
yeah.
right.
Off of 625.
Yep, yeah,
That's why.
like towards Brecknock a little bit.
Yeah,
yeah. Oh my
we're-
god, I love Brecknock.
We're Brecknock Elementary,
Yeah.
like in Lancaster County.
Okay,
but
yeah,
not,
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we're
not the
Brecknock
Berks
Township,
Farm,
not the Berks Farm, which is- We're a house away from being in Governor Mifflin, which
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wild. My
Oh,
gosh.
that's cool.
You're
Yeah, that's
never-
right.
Did you start out as
It's
a
a vote of
teacher?
confidence,
I did,
I guess.
yeah. I
If
started
anything,
teaching in
you know.
Jersey,
Okay.
and then I moved to
Yeah.
Birmingham,
That's right.
and
I'm like,
but
maybe
I,
they'll do whatever
I
we ask
really
them
only
to
taught
do.
in two
Right.
districts.
Yeah.
I taught in New Jersey, and then I taught in Hanover Township.
Okay.
And then from my teaching
And then
role,
you
I
got-
moved
did you
into
go
the
back to
tech
school and get
integrator.
your-
I'm not actually
Good.
certified.
That's
This was supposed to be a temporary position.
Hired for you're not certified?
Well, it's. I mean, I'm
I'm not
certified
saying- no,
science.
I'm not saying-
No, I'm certified 7 to 12
Yeah,
science.
exactly.
But
Yeah.
the tech integrator role
Yeah, that's
is really supposed to
fascinating.
be
Well, best of luck to you on that.
temporary.
Yeah.
So it was
That's
like
cool. Well,
for
at
the
least,
rollout
you know,
of our one-to-one
if they've got
program
somebody
and to support and to set that
cares.
stuff up.
That's
And
interesting.
then
Now, is
we
this
were
Rogers,
extended
but
for
can
one
I
more
take
year.
a picture of your picture
Oh yeah,
here?
totally. And I'm
That
on
way?
Twitter.
Somebody
I'm Mrs.
who's in it
Swavely
for the right
at Mrs.
reasons, and
Swavely on
that's fine.
Twitter.
That's-
So
Okay.
please
that's
feel
what
free
teachers
to